Welcome back to the final part of ChatterBox. Tonight's episode has absolutely flown by, and I'm delighted to say we're joined by boxing journalist Tris Dixon. I want to open up with Eubank Ben. I know it was a fight that we were all buzzing to see, and we talked about it at length. I was at the press conference. We were just getting ready for it to start, but it looked like we may never get to see it now. You're a man in the know. Tell us what we know about this whole episode.
The fight fell apart with just a couple of days to go in the end. You mentioned the press conference. They ended up obviously announced at the press conference that the fight was off because of a positive finding on Conor Benn's VADA test. And obviously that, I suppose, in many ways should have been that. It turns out that came to light to all the, in inverted commas, necessary parties on September 23rd. But they still left it to the 11th hour to cancel stroke postpone the event. As you said, it was a fight we were all looking forward to for various reasons, not just because of the fathers, not just because of the grudge, but because of this catch weight scenario, which obviously after what's happened now, it becomes even more of a talking point. But obviously with Conor Benn going up in weight and Chris Eubank Jr. coming down in weight, we didn't know where the advantage would be, whether Eubank would still be just too big, or if the advantage would slip towards Conor Benn with Eubank having to drain himself, as Eubank was telling us on a regular basis. As it turned out, we didn't get to find out. We've been told that we probably will get to find out at some time or another. I'm sure we will discuss that. But that's the lay of the land, and we're still waiting for confirmation. You know, Ben says he's going to clear his name. Eddie's talked about due process being needed, and obviously that is required one way or another, innocent or guilty. We need to get to the bottom of what's happened.
Just to be clear, we don't know the full details of what's been going on. However, we're just talking about what has been reported in the media.
How can it be? How can we get this situation, Tris, where someone fails a drug test by you on a VADA test, but that's not acknowledged by UKAD, and the fight can potentially still go ahead?
So interesting question, Carl. And I don't claim to be a massive expert on doping, although I do know bits, obviously having been around boxing for a long period of time and studied a lot of these cases quite closely. Obviously, the test VADA did could have been done on a different day to UKAD. And so obviously, if they'd found trace amounts, then maybe a day or so later he would have been clear. And so if UKAD had tested him a couple of days later, then maybe the sample that he produced would have been different. So you can say that. Also, VADA is a different testing agency. I'm sure that both agencies probably do test for Clomiphene, which is a female fertility drug which was what trace amounts were found of with Ben's VADA test. But VADA is very comprehensive, and it does test for more substances than UKAD. And people do say that VADA is the gold standard, and it really is because of the amount of things it does test for. And obviously, when we look at these positive tests that have littered the landscape for the last few years, the majority of them have been found by VADA.
For me, trace amounts means an incredibly small amount of something. Do you believe that there's any way that this could have inadvertently got into his food, into a protein shake and stuff like that? Because his strength and conditioning coach is well renowned amongst the boxing industry. He's somebody who's worked with a lot of major fighters. There's never been any kind of claims of cheating or drug use. How does that happen? And is a trace amount mean you're completely guilty, or is it a trace amount that it's one size fits all?
Well, I suppose, it's easy for us to say from the outside looking in that it's a one size fits all. Like if it's a trace amount, then it's in your system, right? But I'm sure that there are instances where there are loopholes and grey areas, and it's not as black and white as it seems. However, the experts have said about Clomiphene that there is no way that it comes into your system via contamination or anything like that, because it is a female fertility drug, and it is used by people in the male population to increase their levels of testosterone.
We've had this before with Canelo's situation, who got a 6-month ban in 2018 after traces of clenbuterol, which he blamed on tainted meat. and it never seems to get mentioned now. So is it the situation where if Ben has an excuse similar to this one, or whether you believe it or not, is it something that can be forgotten quickly, or should it be forgotten quickly?
That's a great question. Because Canelo's far from the only one. Obviously, the Hall of Shame is going back and back and back now in terms of boxing and our track record, and it's really not starting. It's really not looking great. Um, I mean, I can't remember the last time anyone actually held their hands up and said, "Okay, you got me." We've heard these excuses, whether it's wild boar, tainted meat, protein shakes, contamination. I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question is. When is and also you've got to factor in this. Whenever this sort of thing happens, people's nearest and dearest, family, relatives, trainers pile in and say, "Oh, we know him. He'd never do it." And he's clean. He's a clean athlete. I know him. I think the thing is, this is something that I think is so shameful for people that do it. I don't think they would tell anybody. I don't think that they would go on stuff and say to their best friend or even their partner, certainly not their coach, who they want to respect them, and say, "Oh, do you know what? I'm on stuff."
That's such a good point, Tris, that everybody jumps on board and says, "I know this guy would never do it," but if you're taking it, are you telling anybody? You're not even telling your wife. You're literally keeping that to yourself. I think it's a sense of, well, a few reasons why you would keep it to yourself. It's shameful, really. You'd be embarrassed that you're having to do this. If you'd asked me 5 or 6 years ago, I I don't think it was an issue really in boxing. I thought there was maybe one or two of maybe a top guys with money doing it. But now I believe that it's more rife. I think that figure that he talked about is massively inflated. But I think there's more people doing it than we would like to believe.
There's no deterrent. I would like to think that if someone is guilty of taking performance enhancing drugs, I would love for trainers to stop working with them. I would love for promoters to stop putting them on their shows, rather than just have to rely on bans being handed down. Like, take an ethical and moral stance against these guys.
It's happened many times before where promoters try to put fights on. And I imagine that if this was a lesser fight, guys getting paid 10 or 15 or 20 grand, then they make an example of these boys. But because there was so much money to be made in this fight, then they try to, push on with the fight. And it's absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong.
Very informative discussion. Now, what happens if the B sample comes back negative? That's the big question. And I mean, it happened probably one in 1,000 times. But do we all hold our hands up and say sorry?
Great question. I think no, because I don't think. Well, the people that have personally attacked Conor Benn probably have to hold their hands up and say sorry. I think the people that attack the promoter and the promotion probably don't, because ethically, the right thing to do was to wait for the B sample. So, I mean, yes, hold your hands up. If you attacked Conor Benn and said, "Yes, you're a cheat," throw the book at him when the B sample hadn't come back, then yeah, maybe you jumped the gun. But in terms of the promotion and how it was run, I think if Eddie Hearn could get that one back, he probably would, right?
No
Here's
doubt.
another
Yeah, I
question.
think
If the B sample comes back negative, why do you override the B sample with the A sample that was positive?
Well, that's a great question, Carl, and that would be one for the guys at VADA. And no, but seriously, it would be for them to explain, like, how's this happened, and what are the options and which one should we put more stock in. But yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because how do you know? How do you know?
fair. It's a question that we'll ask when that B sample finally comes back. Do you think we'll ever see that fight, honestly, between all of us?
Money talks, so my gut
Yeah.
instinct says yes. But for me, and I think that it will be a huge fight, but for me, it's somewhat tarnished given the foul taste that was left from the previous effort to get it on.